Greetings, campers, progressive political junkies, theater and film buffs, and today, of all days, kingsters of all nations. Welcome to the world according to Yoni. As ever, I am your host, Yoni Martin, and you're not. I'd like to start today's show by doing something a little different. I would like to thank President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris and the Democrats in the House and Senate for allowing me the opportunity to do a show about something other than just politics. And no, that doesn't mean I'm giving up or done with the topic of politics. Come on. With a one-person majority in the Senate, especially when you consider that two of those Democrats, Joe Manchin and the ever-disappointing Kristen Sinema, are actually dinos, which for those not in with the lingo mean Democrat in name only, we've got a problem. And I mean, come on. Chuck Schumer, as majority leader, has not shown any of the cojones that scumbag Moscow Mitch showed when he was majority leader. That makes me kind of sick if I think about it. So what this means is the 2022 midterm election is going to be every bit as important, if not more so, than the 2020 election. This is the election that will determine whether President Biden is able to work with the House and Senate to get things accomplished, or, like President Obama before him, he'll have a party of thugs and fascists obstructing his every attempt to do anything for the people of this country. And then, as I read this weekend, you've got neocon assholes like William Kristol telling the Democrats, hey, there are Republicans here for the taking. Oh, goody. Since Donnie Dumpster, the monster dipshits like Kristol and his fellow neocons created with 40 years of, lies, racism, corporate giveaways, and wars, has co-opted their party, turning it into the Rithugla QAnon party. Kristol and company figure, we've done this for 40 years. Why don't we just keep suckering the Democrats into flipping off the progressive wing of the party so they can gather all those former Republicans into the Democratic Party, making it, come on, work with me. Yeah, you guessed it, the new Republican Party. So, no, I am not leaving politics behind. Politics is everything. It's in everything, as you'll see shortly. The topic of today's show, or the principal topic, is an aspect of human sexuality that tends to get a lot of titters, no pun intended, but it doesn't get a lot of serious conversation, and personally, I think it deserves and merits serious conversation. I refer to the topic of consensual adult spanking. Does it get more political than that? Now, I can hear some of you saying, oh, come on. How do you consider that? That's just kinky sex. How can you consider that political? Well, we're, dealing with human sexuality here, a topic that freaks a lot of people out. It shouldn't at this point in time, but it does. It brings out the judgmental in people all over the political spectrum. You don't have to be a Republican to be disgusted by aspects of sexuality. I know just as many Democrats who are freaked out and disgusted by anything that they don't consider normal, whatever the hell that is. We are a country that was founded by the Puritans, a people who were so obnoxiously self-righteous that everyone in Europe was happy to see them cross the Atlantic just to be rid of them. Consensual adult spanking, which I guess you could call a subset of the BDSM world, is a topic close to my heart. Now, this will come as no surprise to those of you who know me well, especially as I don't tend to live my life in a closet. I've written about this on my blog. I've directed an off-Broadway play on the topic, which coincidentally was written by my wife. I've directed several film shorts featuring this subject matter. Now, before some of you have heart attacks because you're thinking, oh my God, 50 Shades of Grey or some bullshit like that, where nothing is consensual and everyone involved is damaged in some way, shape, or form. Yes, I have been involved in what we call, quote unquote, the spanking scene for as far back as I can remember. One of the things we say is, I was seen before there was a scene. And for those of you watching the show, not listening on the podcast, you can see that I am wearing a t-shirt with Bugs Bunny spanking his girlfriend Lola. I have waited months to wear this shirt just for this show. There are tens of thousands of people around the world involved in the spanking scene. And I may be understating that. There may be a lot more, but that's the minimum of what I personally know. Now, I have said for many years, I believe spanking is the greatest underground kink there was or is. You may not practice it, but, come on. Who hasn't, smacked the backside every once in a while or smacked a little ass during sex play? Folks, that's consensual adult spanking. It's not scene spanking, I guess, but it is nonetheless spanking. So, want more proof? Okay, here you go. How many people watched the episode of The Big Bang Theory where Sheldon, of all people, spanks Amy? And Amy likes it. There's, come on, everybody's favorite, John Wayne movies. McClintock, Donovan's Reef. He spanks women in both those. I grew up on those. How about you? Mary Louise Parker in Weeds. The show Outlander. You can go on and on and on. And in movies, film, television, theater, whatever, you will see and hear spanking referred to. Some jokes, some seriously, but it's there. It's a part of our culture, just one, like most sexual topics, we don't tend to talk about much. And if you want to talk about something that's truly bipartisan, well, there's nothing more bipartisan than spanking. What do I mean by that? Well, the spanking community represents all political viewpoints, all religions, backgrounds, professions. It's one of the few things in this world that runs the gamut from the rich to the poor. It's one thing the rich and the poor have in common. I have known throughout my life, I have known fundamentalist Christians. I have known agnostics. I have known people of every religion involved in the spanking scene. I know lawyers, doctors, truck drivers, waitresses, waiters, actors. Hello. There are people in every profession. These are not sick, twisted, damaged people. These are fully functional human beings who, in some way, shape, or form, get a sexual thrill out of the act of consensual adult spanking. I'm going to keep saying that so everybody gets that. And the one thing I also want to talk about with this is the hypocrisy of our political leaders who love to take anything they can get their little graspy hands on and call it a perversion so that they can vilify people. This hypocrisy is proven in the easiest way by the fact that I haven't looked into this recently, but I do know that 10 years ago, there were more professional dominatrixes per capita in Washington, D.C. than anywhere else in this country. Do you think that's a coincidence? Do you think there aren't political leaders involved in this? Come on, give me a break. Anyway, all of this brings me to today's guest. I have wanted to talk to journalist and author Jillian Keenan since I first read her book, Sex with Shakespeare, I don't know, pretty shortly after it came out, I think 4 years or so ago. As an actor, I figured, wow, this could be a really nifty, fun new take on the works of the bard. And to some degree, it is. But even more so, the works of Shakespeare are used in this book to follow and illuminate the author's honest and incredibly courageous journey of self-discovery into the world of, yes, I'm going to say it again, consensual adult spanking. Now, Jillian, to prove the point of those who are fully functional and do some amazing work, is one of the most accomplished women I have ever met. She has traveled this entire world. She has written for the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Atlantic, Playboy, obviously Sex with Shakespeare, which has been optioned for a movie by Warner Brothers. So Jillian is certainly a highly functioning person. And now she's even added to everything else she does her new YouTube channel, which is called Kinking Out Loud. And if you haven't taken a look, you should, because Jillian is articulate, smart, funny, and interesting. So, with that, I would like to introduce you to my new friend, Jillian Keenan. Hi, Jillian.
Hi.
Some people know you from Sex with Shakespeare. Some people, probably a minor group, have read your works in the New York Times and Playboy and the other magazines you've written for. You have made a name for yourself in terms of, I guess, the kink scene, and specifically the spanking scene, by being brutally honest about your own life. And I use the word brutal because I know you have dealt with people who looked at you as if you were some kind of weirdo or freak, as anybody in the scene has dealt with at some time or another. For those in my audience who don't know, I am a member of the spanking scene in this country. I have been a member for a very long time. I know, Jillian, you don't like the term spanko.
Yeah, but it's the best we have. So
no, I use the term spankoholic.
I like that. I like that.
Because for me, it was a natural part of who I was. I do not remember a time in my life when I wasn't totally focused on it. It has always been a part of my sexuality since I was a child. And I specifically knew then, that was a part of who I was. The difference I had, and I'm lucky as hell, from you, is it never occurred to me there was anything strange about it. You, on the other hand, went through a process. And I'd love you to tell the audience a little bit about the process you had to go through to accept who you are and be willing to share that.
Well, I think, and I feel like I should apologize for escalating so very quickly. But really, the most honest way to answer that question is to say that I think that my own very difficult journey to come to terms with my spanking paraphilia, I consider it my sexual orientation, is that I was abused as a child in specifically that way. I was spanked as a child, and it's. I mean, that can be extremely traumatic for a number of reasons, some that are obvious and some that are not so obvious to everyone. One, of course, when you have a sexual orientation, it does not manifest magically at age 18, just like people with same-sex attraction or same-sex orientations often feel stirrings or hints of their orientations from a very early age. I did too, and it sounds like you did as well. And when your sexuality is used against you in a violent and non-consensual and punitive way, as it was for me when I was a child, that can be obviously super traumatic in just so many ways. But also there is no explanation for or validation of that trauma. As a child, if you are being abused in that specific way on that specific body part by a parent, the only messages you get, both from our culture, particularly in the 1980s and 90s when I was growing up, and even our legal system, is that that is okay. It is an okay thing for a parent to do to a child. It is a disciplinary tactic and not, as it is in reality, abuse. So that was very confusing. And then, of course, by the time I emerged into adulthood, I became aware of pop psychology and pop psychiatry. And I became aware of this totally incorrect theory, but one that was embraced by sort of the majority of mental health professionals for a long time, that spanking paraphilias, or fetishes, to use the more colloquial term, are an eroticization of childhood trauma. That if a child is spanked in a traumatic way, the child unconsciously handles that trauma by eroticizing it and turning it into a fetish or paraphilia. That is all nonsense, and I have a YouTube video about why. But when I was a teenager, I hadn't unpacked this yet, and I was really freaked out. I felt like my sexuality, my daily obsession, was just a traumatic response to some really horrible and abusive things that happened to me as a child. And of course, that is not a very fun feeling. So I think that is rather intense, but also the most honest way to explain why I didn't have the easiest time coming to terms with my sexual orientation.
Well, you obviously, from your book, you had a very complicated relationship with your mother, to say the least, which kind of makes that understandable. Yeah. But that brings something else to mind, which I think people may find kind of hard to understand, because if they find the spanking fetish bizarre in and of itself, the fact that you are also you are very active in protecting children from the abuse of spanking and other forms of child abuse. People may not understand how you can want one for yourself and be against it, in terms of children. My way of dealing with it has always been to say, it's too much fun to waste on children.
Yeah, I mean, once someone referred to me as a spanking fetishist, anti-spanking activist, which I thought was very funny and not incorrect. Yeah. I don't see any conflict or contradiction there, because just like the vast majority of adults are sex-oriented, that is, the primary expression of their sexuality is sex, by which I mean vaginal, anal, or oral intercourse. Just like people can love that in their consensual adult sex lives, doesn't mean they want that to happen non-consensually to children. And that is exactly how I feel about spanking. I can love it in my consensual adult erotic life, but I don't want it to be non-consensually inflicted on little kids.
I think that's an excellent way of phrasing it. And
Yeah.
who could argue that?
Well, something that always kind of makes me see red is every once in a while I meet someone and they hear about the work that I do. And sometimes, and I know it's well intentioned. I know they think they're being funny, but sometimes they said, "Oh, well, if you've been a spanking fetishist ever since you were a little kid, it seems like you would have really loved being spanked by a parent." And to that, I can only say, like I just said before, a person can enjoy sex as an adult, but it doesn't mean they would have enjoyed it with their parents as a child.
No, and that is such a perfect way to explain it.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever heard it explained better than that.
Well, I mean, I've had time to think about it.
Well, I mean, for me, my parents, bless their hearts, used to hire high school and college girls to babysit my brothers and I. And because I was fully aware of what I wanted, going back as far as I can remember, you talk about you realized at some point you were a brat. Without getting, at this point anyway, into what bratting is. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a babysitter we had that I couldn't brat into spanking me. Intentionally, I'm talking about at 4 years of age. You know, I knew what I was going for and I got it. So yeah, it would have been different if it was my parents, but you know, very cute college and high school girls. And I never went through one of those Freudian latency periods. I'm not a big fan of Freud.
Yeah.
There was never a time that I wasn't aware of who I was, and didn't kind of go for it.
Well, I'm super happy and relieved to hear that you did not have traumatic experiences with spanking as a child. And that, in fact, it sounds like you had some quite positive ones. I feel like I need to be really clear that I also don't think babysitters should be spanking kids. Even if kids try to provoke it, I don't think anyone should be hitting kids ever for any reason. But I'm sure you agree.
I do, except for the fact that I knew that I wanted it. I needed it. I got it. I made sure, you know, if I had to, whatever I had to do to provoke it, you know, I mean, I know you did when you got older and you were very conscious of it.
Yeah,
I was
for sure.
I was conscious at a very young age. I don't know why. I don't know how.
Well, I'm a little scared that someone, because I have these conversations all the time, and I do know how desperate some aspects of American society are to misinterpret anything they hear. And I really don't want anyone to hear this and think, oh, well, maybe this little kid is provoking me into a spanking. Maybe I should give this child what I am telling myself this child is asking for. I want to be like really clear.
No, I think
don't hit kids. Just don't do that.
I think that's an important thing. Now you talk about having you know, what you went through. I went through something else. I was molested.
I'm sorry.
It's, you know, it is what it is. And it was by a neighbor guy. And it has nothing to do with what made me who I am. I was already who I was. It led to other problems, as you know, those kind of traumas do. But fortunately, I guess they weren't sexual problems. So,
well, I think it's really brave of you to share that story, and I'm so sorry that happened to you.
The only way I've been able to cope with it and deal with it is by talking about it and sharing that with people. Because I don't know any other way to handle something like that.
Yeah.
If I talk about it and I express my feelings about it, and I thought it was, I suppressed the memory for years.
Yeah.
And when I recalled it, I went into a horrible tailspin. I mean, I was suicidal. It was not good. And I thought I was crazy because what, am I imagining this?
Yeah.
And it was only when my brother called me and told me that he had lifelong guilt because at like 6 years of age, he'd been outside a shed where the same person was molesting a neighborhood girl, that I realized I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined it. It was real.
Yeah.
Now, this, of course, gets us off the topic of spanking, which I find a lot more fun to deal with. So,
Me too, for sure.
yeah.
But I mean, I think it's related in that I think that what you just said about the therapeutic or healing value of talking about things and having our experiences validated by other people, I think that applies to our community too. And so I'm glad that you're opening up more space for people to talk about these things, because I think that does a lot of good in the world.
Well, thank you. I'm so thrilled to have you here to talk with me about it because Sex with Shakespeare, I think, is a phenomenal piece of work on so many levels. First of all, your ability to analyze the works of Shakespeare as you do. If it was only that from a theatrical point of view, you've had some brilliant insights, but utilizing it to explain your journey, the visualization of Shakespearean characters to help you along in your journey. It's an amazing tool. As an actor, as a director, as a writer, I'm so blown away by it. And I don't know how to say that any better than that.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me, especially coming from a professional director and artist like you. So thank you.
Thank you. I mean, again, I said this to you earlier when we were talking off camera, but the bravery, because you know as well as I do that probably 90% of the people in the spanking scene are terrified of being outed. They're afraid of the judgment of their friends, their family, the people they work for. As far as I'm concerned, it's probably the greatest underground kink there is. You can't watch TV for a week, for example, without seeing some kind of reference to it, whether it's teasing, joking, or whatever. It's always there. But the fear, is amazing. And having hosted parties for 20 plus years, I've seen it, and it makes me sad because I want people to feel free to be who they are. I don't hide who I am. My wife, thank God, feels the same way. She's been very out and proud about who she is. And it's an important, I think it's an important way to grow as a human being, and a way to feel free as a human being. And it saddens me that people feel constrained. So when somebody like you does the writing you have done in, your book, in major magazines and newspapers, that's a tremendous gift to a lot of people.
Well, thank you. It saddens me when people feel frightened also. And I I also would love to see more people in our community feel empowered and supported to share as much of themselves as they want to, whenever they want to.
Well, I mean, you differentiated, I guess, from somebody like me.
Mm.
You've gone through the whole gamut because it took you years to get where you are. I mean, my God, in your relationship, how long before you could even say the word spanking?
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely been through a list of experiences as a result of outing myself as publicly as I did and as I continue to do. And not all of those experiences were good. There's been a lot of blowback.
We seem to have, your camera seems to have frozen.
To answer your
There you go.
question, in my previous relationship, my first marriage, the marriage that I described in Sex with Shakespeare, I am regretful to say that, you know, I met that man when I was 20. So I was very young. I didn't even know myself yet. So I wasn't being honest with myself. So it was very hard for me to be honest with anyone else. But I did not start talking to him about my sexual orientation until we had already been together for 6 years and were unfortunately already engaged. And that relationship did not end happily. And I'm, you know, I forgive myself for how long it took me to talk to him about spanking, because I was only 20 when I met him, and it is hard to be honest with ourselves about these things. But I do hope that some of the work that I do might help other people in some small way disclose their identities with their partners sooner, and hopefully maybe avoid some of the mistakes that I have made.
You're not alone, though. I mean, I can go back to 1993, 94, when I was attending, I think it was my first spanking party. And I remember there was a woman who came, and it was, you know, it was a totally different world. We didn't have email. We didn't have all the forms of communication that we take for granted now. So that if you joined a club, our club, for example, Crimson Moon in Chicago.
Oh, right. I've heard of it. Crimson Moon
Yes.
is very well known.
We had a 6-page application with questions that people had to fill out, which was followed by a telephone interview, because
Wow.
safety was a major concern, and we wanted all play to be safe, sane, consensual, and everybody to feel protected. So
Yeah.
we went through very serious and rigorous efforts to ensure that as best we could. But there was this woman who came to this party, and I remember her standing in the door as play started. And she stood there for about 10 minutes. And she'd come hundreds of miles for this party. She'd paid for it. And 10 minutes, she disappeared, never to be seen again.
Yep.
Totally terrorized. Now, I know you said on your YouTube video that your first party, you didn't end up going either.
Yeah, it was the sounds. I at that point I had already outed myself in the New York Times, so I thought, well, shit, I've got nothing left to hide, so I might as well go to a party. And I remember I went to the LGBTQ center in downtown Manhattan, where a spanking party was being held, and
boy, we were at the same parties.
Were we?
Yeah, we went to those parties a bunch too.
Well, I wish I had walked in the door, because I did not. I heard the slapping sounds coming from inside, and I got scared and I left, and I didn't even try to go to another party for like 3 or 4 years. So
yeah. But see,
regrets.
The interesting thing though is what happened to you was maybe 15 more years later, and you had the same response, even though
Yeah.
there was so much more information out there. Hell,
So much more.
you would put some of the information out there.
Yeah. Well, I guess maybe sometimes it's easier to be brave behind a computer screen than in person.
Uh, yeah, well, we've both screwed that one up today. So it's, again, you're frozen again. I hate that. There we go. I should mention that you're in Mexico City. So if we're having some of these issues, we'll blame it on the distance rather than, Zoom or anything.
Hopefully there won't be too many technical issues.
But I think, yeah, what we're talking about is far more important than any freezing of cameras that we can deal with here.
Yeah.
I've got just so many things because my respect for you and for the truth of your journey is I can't really express it the way I feel it, because I've seen over the years so many people go through it. And the honesty, I keep coming back to that, the honesty that you have written with about yourself. You haven't spared yourself, and that takes courage. And I say power to you, because you have, you may know, but for our audience here, I don't know how many people understand just how difficult this can be for people. I mean, in the 60s, coming out of the closet as gay was, a horrendous effort for a lot of people. I had an uncle who died of AIDS, and my grandmother always said it was cancer, because she didn't want to acknowledge that he was gay.
I'm sorry.
And he was a great guy. And I always felt for him, because what might his life have been like if he hadn't grown up at the time he did, with the restraints that were put on his ability to be who he was? Well, that same kind of thing now is with people who have come out in the kink scene, or, and I like the way you differentiate the more hardcore BDSM scene from the spanking scene, because I think many people don't understand there are differences. And that's not to say anything against the more hardcore scene. But it's been my experience, and I know, having read your work, that your experience is the same. There's something about spanking that is hardwired in us, that is a very specific part of our personalities, our sexual makeup.
Absolutely. I'll jump in just to say that I personally would not use the phrase more hardcore, but you're absolutely right that I do. I tend to use the term BDSM communities, plural, because there really are a number of communities and we're all connected. I like to think of us as all different branches of the same tree. But absolutely, Spankos are our own branch. And I do think that there is, in my mind, a lot of these words, one of the difficult things about talking about paraphilias and talking about our community is that we don't even have agreed upon terms to talk about what we're talking about. Most people have never heard the word paraphilia before. And as for the word fetish, technically a fetish is an object. So technically a fetish is not what we have. It's just the more colloquial, widely understood, useful term. But because we don't have the language to talk about these things, I am sort of making up a lot of terms as I go. But as you, to go back to what you said about our sexual orientations being hardwired, I do think there is value to a conversation about the difference between paraphilias or people with paraphilias and the difference between people with a kink. And I could go into my opinions about that. But again, they're just my opinions. And I think we as a community are really, really far away from having a widely agreed upon lexicon to talk about these things with. So that makes it tricky.
Yeah, but this is your interview, so I want you to feel free to get into your opinions. I want to hear your opinions. So please share.
Okay, well, in recent years, I've started using, I've started abandoning the term vanilla because my personal opinion is that it's not particularly useful. These days, it's very trendy. We have a post 50 Shades of Grey world. Nobody really identifies as vanilla anymore. Everyone thinks they're like super adventurous and super kinky. And also, I think people tend to push back at terms like vanilla because they think it's the same as boring, or they find it somewhat offensive. Yeah. So as someone, so for me and possibly also for you, I know for a great many people in the Spanko community, although of course not all, for me, the best way I phrase it is spanking occupies the place in my life that sex occupies in the lives of sex-oriented people. I've started talking about sex-oriented people because I think that that is a more functional, more useful, and less potentially offensive term than vanilla. So in my mind, and I made a video about my own personal sort of chart of sexual orientation where I compared the Kinsey scale with what I call the Keenan scale to explain my own theory of what sex-oriented means versus fetish-oriented, which is what I consider myself to be and a great many of my friends. But in my mind, a key difference between having a paraphilia and having a kink is that having a paraphilia is having an innate, unchosen, and lifelong attraction to an object, identity, or activity that is not sex. Whereas a kink is having a preferred or optional attraction to an object, identity, or activity that is not sex that often goes hand in hand with sex. And I think, you know, I don't use these terms and draw these lines to be exclusive. I'm not trying to distance myself or people like me from sex-oriented spankos or sex-oriented people, but rather to give people like me the language to understand what they're going through. One of the biggest responses I've gotten to the work that I've done is I've gotten a huge reaction from people to the fact that I have started talking openly about the fact that spanking for me is not a side dish to sex. It is basically a replacement for it. And the truth is, I feel very neutral about sex. I don't hate it, but I never crave it. And I could live very easily without it. And I've got a ton of messages from people all around the world being like, oh shit, like thank you for saying that, because all this time I've known that I was obsessed with spanking, but I thought that I was supposed to be into spanking in this very sex-centric 50 Shades of Grey sort of way, where it's a little, you know, slap and tickle with 8 rounds of Kama Sutra positions.
To bring that in, that I have a hard time even saying the name, because you know, when things are written by people who have no concept of what they're talking about, I mean, great, have an imagination and fantasize in whatever way you will, but when you're talking about something, an activity, a life that means something to people, and you don't have any real experience of it, my gut instinct is shut the fuck up. Let somebody who actually knows what you're talking about deal with it. Where I guess I differentiate from you somewhat is I consider it a part of my sexual makeup. It's a huge part of it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I could live without either.
Yeah, and that's valid. That's absolutely valid.
And I think that's something a lot of people don't understand. I understand it because having been involved the way I have for as long as I have seen people run the gamut of how they view it. You
Yeah.
know, people of your viewpoint,
Orientation.
yeah, thank you. I'm sitting here trying to find the word that makes sense.
Like I said, we don't have a useful lexicon yet. Hopefully someday.
Someday, but not yet.
Yeah.
It runs the gamut from, and there are people who probably are further along than you in that regard of spanking is my sex. That's, I don't care, to people like me who, it's not like the usual, I guess, people who, engage in a sex and a little smack on the tush and that kind of thing. But it is certainly something that can lead to sex. The orientation is so wide that you can't pin it down, because here I am on one, here's this person here, here's Jillian Keenan here, here's this person over here.
Yeah.
How do you form a lexicon for it? It's very strange, because I remember in running the club that I would listen to people go, no, it's not sexual at all. And I'm sitting there going, wait a minute. You lay over somebody's lap, or you bend over something with your backside up in the air, your skirt up or your pants down, and somebody's taking their hand or an implement on that part of your anatomy, and there's nothing sexual about it.
Well, I agree with you, but I have gotten some considerable blowback from members of the community for expressing that opinion. So I am definitely aware of the fact that not everyone agrees with us, but I agree with you.
Yeah, well, that's nice to know.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I had to come to understand, because I was, running a club or co-running a club, that there were people who felt this way. And you have to, in that kind of setting, be able to understand, accept, and make sure others understand and accept those people and their view of what it's about. With, oh, look, Alexa's trying to talk to me.
Yeah. Hi, Alexis.
She's probably recording everything we say, because
I mean, I will say I absolutely understand where that opinion comes from. The idea that spankings are not sexual, that they are purely disciplinary, is a big part of my fantasy too. It's a big part of my headspace. It's a big part of my erotic life. But I am of the opinion that people who push this "it's not sexual" line, or that platonic spankings are possible line, I think what I wish they would do is two things. First, I wish they would interrogate how much that opinion is influenced by the fantasy, by the eroticization of the idea that spankings aren't sexual, that they're disciplinary. That's a big part of my headspace too. So I wish they would interrogate how much of that is just leaning into a headspace. And second, and much more importantly, I really, really wish they would think very critically about what message they send to people who either practice or support, condone, or enable child battery when they say that it's possible for a spanking to be non-sexual. Because I'm over here saying that state-sanctioned child battery should be, which is what I call spanking kids, should be criminalized because it is unavoidably sexually a problematic thing to do to children. And then when people in this community, which of all communities should recognize spanking as a sex act, or a sexual act, I should say, what message do they send to parents and lawmakers when they say that it is possible for a spanking to be platonic? So,
yeah, the whole subject matter gets so complicated. I don't want to take an audience, especially an audience that doesn't know what the hell we're talking about, and confuse them further. But it's important, I think, to differentiate the fact that you can do something that's sexual with someone without wanting to have sex with that person.
We do it all the time. People go dancing with platonic partners, and yes, you can go dancing with a partner and it can be a platonic exchange. You can have a platonic relationship. Certainly I have platonic friends with whom I do spanking play. But the act itself, just like the act of dancing, is still athletic, whether or not you are, I don't know, teammates on a dance team. The act of spanking is a sexual act. I know that I'm not explaining myself well here, but I am working on a video about this very question. So hopefully at some point I will clarify my thoughts in much better terms and put them on YouTube.
Well, you know what? I'm going to give your YouTube channel a little plug here for those who are listening rather than watching. Just go to YouTube and type in Jillian, Jillian, Keenan, Keenan, and you will find Jillian's videos. They
can also go to youtube.com/kinking out loud, which is the name of the channel.
There you go. Thank you. And they're well worth watching.
Thank you.
I enjoy them. You know, I enjoy anybody talking about this.
About spanking.
Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah, I enjoy it too. If
you're not doing it, you want to talk about it, right?
Yes.
So there you go. And with you, part of the fun is, okay, I'm a crazy actor, director type, so I'm supposed to be, you know, a little out of my mind. You are a published author. You have written for the New York Times, Playboy, the Atlantic, Washington Post, I believe, among others. And you also are a journalist. You don't just write about spanking, you write about important issues. And so for you to talk about this brings, I think, a level of seriousness to the conversation that certain of us aren't considered to have. We, you know, it shouldn't be that way, but it is. So we deal with what we have. It's, I don't know, it's something that for me, I just can't talk about enough, because for me, I want to normalize it.
Yeah.
For it doesn't mean I want everybody to engage in it, because I want everybody to do what they want to do. I just don't want people who don't understand it to be judging it because they don't know anything about it. You don't want to judge your neighbor. Well, the people who watch this show don't want to judge their LGBTQ friends and family. We know there are some who do, but believe me, they're not watching this. I want the same thing in terms of the spanking community, the BDSM community, or even though, as you say, it's all a part of the same.
Yeah.
It's just simply something that some of us feel, and it's who we are. And it's really not that different. At least I don't see it as being that different. Um, so, in talking about it and doing things like writing your book or writing articles, or for my wife, writing her book and writing her play about spanking that we did off Broadway and are trying to make into a film, it's trying to bring it to a mainstream audience, not to convert anybody, although if we do, that's always kind of nice, but to just, it's just another way of living, another aspect of life. And I don't know if I'm saying that well either, but it's kind of how I feel about it. The One of the things that means a lot to me is that the portrayal of people in the scene that most people have seen makes people in the scene out to be damaged in some way. You know,
Yeah.
in Secretary, Maggie Gyllenhaal's character was a cutter. She
Yep.
damaged herself. She was in a psychiatric facility.
Yeah.
James Spader's character was just so out of touch with his own humanity, except in this one regard. I won't even get into the 50 Shades,
Yeah.
but you know, the people I know, and I know the people you know, come from every walk of life. There
Yeah.
are doctors, there are truck drivers, there are rabbis, there are priests and ministers
Mhm.
who lead absolutely quote unquote normal, whatever that means, lives, and are not damaged. It just happens to be something innate with them. It's like, to me, would you go to your gay cousin or sister or brother and say that, well, they must be damaged in some way if they want to have sex with, someone of their sex? Or for a trans person to have, there must be problems because they can't be who they were born to be. Well, maybe that's not who they were born to be. Uh, you know,
And as you know, that was the actual psychiatric explanation for male homosexuality in the 1950s. They said that male homosexuality was caused by absent fathers and overbearing mothers. And today we know that that theory is not only super incorrect, it's also super damaging. And so a big part of what I try to convey in my writing is that these trauma theories that were peddled by books and films like 50 Shades of Grey are not only incorrect, they are harmful.
yeah, no, I find them extremely damaging. As a matter of fact, um, not to keep plugging my wife, but her play Euphoric Tendencies, she wrote because I was in a rage about Secretary, because
Mm.
everybody in the scene was going, "Oh, it's so cool! Look, there's a movie with people like us in it," and I'm like, "No, no, we're damaged, and we are not damaged, or as certainly not any more damaged than anybody else walking around."
Yeah.
So it's it's just, we are all who we are, and I think the world would be a lot happier and nicer place if we could just accept that simple little fact and not have to pigeonhole and judge everything that we don't understand. Because if I judged everything I don't understand, my God, the judge, you know.
Well, I think that's very beautifully put.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Because I keep thinking about the things I've read that you've written, and I feel like, I've been doing this for a while and I'm pretty good at it, but God, reading your stuff, I mean, I'm like, there's such intellectual power behind your writing, and I don't want to use the term analysis because that gives it something that I think it lessens what you've done and what you do. It's there's just, you have a very obviously keen intellect that comes across in your writing.
Well, thank you.
It's humorous, it's honest, it's forthright, and like I said before, you don't spare yourself. When you've made mistakes, you talk about your mistakes, but you phrase these things in a way that I think any human being with an intellect above, Neanderthal, which may be insulting to some Neanderthals, can understand. You make it very, very clear. And I wish there were 100 of you, but right now there aren't. There are a bunch of people like me, and then there are people like you and my wife who can do it in a way that people get, and it helps so many people. I don't know if you really understand how many people you have probably helped, how many people you have allowed to feel that their journey was not some strange, bizarro journey, that it's just a journey. It's just that. And I am so thrilled and impressed by that, and by what you have given of yourself, that I wanted you on my show because I wanted you be able to say whatever you wanted to say, but also be able to tell you this, because I know you get feedback, and people probably tell you some of what I'm telling you now, but it's important that you know that you already have made an enormous contribution. And I want more people to read Sex with Shakespeare, because on so many levels, it's such an astounding work. And your articles and even your videos, when you're not sure of what you're doing or saying, and you're finding your own way, because there are thousands, if not millions, of people who have the same feelings that you have had, and going through similar things, that when they read what you write or they hear what you have to say, they go, oh, maybe I'm not a complete and utter freak. And that's an important thing. So,
well, thank you. That means a lot to me, and I certainly hope to help some people. And if anyone has felt emboldened or empowered or uplifted by something I've written, I am humbled and grateful for that.
Here's a question that occurs to me. With the other work you do, I mean, first of all, you're one of the most well-traveled people I've ever come across. I mean, you started what, at 7? Well, I know you were traveling with your mother when you were younger, but on your own at 17, going to Oman and and Europe, Spain, and all the places you've been and the experiences you've had I mean, by the time you were 20, uh, you had done more than most people do by the age of 40.
Well,
So,
I've been very, very blessed.
well, you've it's been a mixed bag though, as you say.
Well, I guess I meant specifically, I have been very blessed to have as many opportunities to travel as I have.
Yeah,
And
but
that's part of what I love about journalism. I get to travel for work. So I love it.
and that's great. The thing I want to, because you are certainly in the spanking community known for Sex with Shakespeare and your articles on spanking. Talk a little bit, if you would, about the other forms of journalism you practice, what else you do, because it's important.
Yeah, I've covered a wide variety of topics. For a while, I was covering piracy and the question of how to prosecute piracy off the Horn of Africa out of a base in Somalia. For the last several years, I've been living in Kenya and Senegal, where I got to cover everything from political movements in West Africa to drug policy and drug business in Kenya and South Africa. I love it. And I feel very grateful and fortunate that for the most part, the writing I do about sexuality has not conflicted with the writing I do about human rights or politics or economics. And so I am so grateful to the amazing editors in my industry who have allowed me to, wear two different shoes at the same time.
Yeah, no, I think that's a real key to talking about the normalcy, because you are not just a sex writer, as the saying goes. You are an actual bona fide journalist. You have been in situations that a lot of us would not want to put ourselves in. It's the truth. And you lead a very, I don't know if I'd say normal, because there aren't all that many people who do what you do, but you, and as you say, your editors have supported you in doing your non-sexual journalism.
Yeah. An interesting thing I've noticed so I started my own YouTube channel, which is about spanking, about a year and a half ago. And it's been very interesting to me in the move from written content to video content to see that maybe the number one comment I've gotten on the YouTube channel, the number one email message I've gotten is from people who keep saying over and over and over again that I look so normal. And that's been interesting. And it came as a little bit of a surprise to me. And at first I was like, well, what does this mean? We all look normal. You look normal. I look normal. But then I realized that a lot of the visual content about our paraphilia is a lot of the existing content is pornographic in nature, or it's blended with BDSM. And that content is absolutely valuable. It's art. And I'm so glad that it's out there. But I do kind of, when I think about it, understand that a lot of those representations of people, they don't look entirely normal. They look heightened. They look larger than life, or they're wearing costumes or outfits. So I think the way I interpret it is when people keep making comments about how normal I look, I think what they're responding to is the fact that I'm not a porn star. I'm not an artist. I really am just a journalist in normal sweats talking on YouTube. And I do think people respond to that.
Well, I don't know that I'd say you're not an artist, because your knowledge of Shakespeare and ability to break it down, and your participation as dramaturg in various Shakespearean companies around the world to put you in the artist category as well.
You say artist category. Some people might say nerd category, but I'll go with artist. That sounds better than nerd.
Yeah, although there's something to be said for neurocategory too, you know.
For sure.
And that's an important point, because guess what? Nerds are people, and nerds can be spankophiles.
Spankoholics.
I love that word. I mean, it certainly describes me. And look, it's the kitty cat behind you.
Oh, you see. Oh, there she is. Hey, baby.
Hey, listen, you know, everybody,
She,
my dogs haven't come in, and I'm like, guys, where are you? But
Daisy showed up to add a little glamour to the show.
oh, is that what that was? I don't know. I thought you were doing pretty well on the glamour part. But yeah, it's important that people understand that it doesn't matter who you are, what you do. There are parts of each of us that we may not even understand where they come from. And it may not even be necessary that we understand where they come from, as long as we don't judge ourselves harshly, as so many do. And that if others judge us, we know that there are enough of us, that there's a support system that we can go to and go, please, I need to talk to somebody who gets this.
Yeah.
Because I just got reamed by some nut job who doesn't get any of this.
I'm sorry.
Well, no, I'm not talking me personally.
Oh. You,
No,
you delivered that line so convincingly. I thought it was you.
No, I'm sure people have, but I just don't give fuck.
Yeah.
You know, I learned not to care about that years ago, because
good for you.
Like I said, for me, it is so ingrained, and because I never, ever, it never dawned on me there was something weird. It's just who I was, and I always accepted that. And I know I'm lucky, because I know so many people who didn't have that.
Yeah.
And the funny thing in talking to you and reading, you know, your writing, is it astounds me that in the years, you know, I like to say I was seen before there was a scene. And in the years since the internet came upon us, and you can click, you know, in 5 seconds, you can find a couple million references to consensual adult spanking and sites, and you can find videos, and you can find anything you want on, which 25 years ago didn't exist.
Yeah.
And yet there are people who still feel the same way people did 25, 30, 40 years ago, that there was something wrong with them. They were freaks because, you know, they didn't know anybody else like them.
Yeah.
And the reason they didn't know then is because people didn't talk about it, because the people who thought they were freaks kept their mouths shut.
Yeah.
Now you can go online and you can find out in a couple of seconds that you're not alone. And yet some people still don't get that there's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with what they feel.
Yeah.
So
it's healthy and natural.
I like that. It's really that simple, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm going to let it go with that, because simple natural. What better way can we wrap the conversation up? So Jillian, I am very, very grateful that you were able to be here with me today and to discuss this topic.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was an honor to finally meet you, and hopefully someday after this pandemic is over, we can finally meet in person.
I would love that. You are a unique individual, and I have a lot of respect for you. So
Thank you.
I love talented people, and you are a talented person. So
Thank you.
thank you. So there you have it. I would like to thank Jillian Keenan for coming on and talking with me. She is a delight. I really, really enjoyed that conversation in case anybody missed it. I don't have time to get into a rant. I think I started the show with my rant. So there you have it. I would like to ask you all, whether you're listening to the podcast or watching on my YouTube channel, to subscribe to the show, especially if you like it, or if you're my friend, or if you're in my family. Subscribe. I want those numbers, people. In the meantime, I hope you all get to engage in whatever kinks you may have, even if your kink is talking and eating. I don't know why I said that. I just thought I should. I want you to have a great week. Stay safe, stay sane, stay healthy. And come back for next week's show, because whatever I do, it's going to be fun. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.